believe it or not everybody in the NBA can shoot well, even though they're a professional player, because that's not everybody's skill set. And then you also have what I call the low post strategy. This is where your goal is to get the ball down low and to get the ball close to the basket and to compete at that level. So there's a lot that law firms can learn about the NBA finals. And today we're going to talk about that in this conversation. Here's the thing. The NBA finals are going on right now, which means we get to see the two best teams in the National Basketball Association compete for the championship for this year. And there's so much that you notice about the game. There are different players, different strategies, there are different, tempos, different speeds that you can work in. And there's so much going on. And it's pretty exciting once you get to the finals, especially if it's a very competitive matchup. But what I think that a lot of law firms can learn from that is really when it comes down to thinking about the strategy itself. Because when it comes down to basketball, and I'm just going to focus on the offensive side, there are three kind of core strategies that you can use. Of course, there's some different sub-strategies, but I'll keep it simple with just three core strategies. You can have a perimeter offense, which means you're going to take a lot of shots from the distance, from the three-point line, or you're a little bit of distance away from the basket. That's what you would call a perimeter offensive strategy, where it's very heavy relying on the people who can shoot well. And believe it or not everybody in the NBA can shoot well, even though they're a professional player, because that's not everybody's skill set. And then you also have what I call the low post strategy. This is where your goal is to get the ball down low and to get the ball close to the basket and to compete at that level. And then the third one is where you have a little bit of a mixed strategy, where you're doing a combination of perimeter and post game, where you're working hand in hand. Now, for me, I started watching basketball probably in the maybe early to mid 90s. And during that time of basketball, it was a very heavy low post game, which means when offense had the ball, they were going to the basket. They were looking for a dunk, or they were looking for a layup. There was so much of the game centered around getting the ball down in the paint and then working the offensive strategy that way. Now, yes, there were some players who stood out as being able to shoot very well, like players like Reggie Miller or players like Jeff Hornacek. Like, you had some really good players who can shoot from the perimeter, but a lot of the game and a lot of the action happened in the post-game strategy. And then as we go into more of the present day, you see a lot of perimeter offense. And here's the thing. Neither strategy is bad. Like, both strategies can actually win games, because there are teams who won championships in the low post game. There are teams who win championships with the perimeter game. What it really does come down to is you understanding your team, you understanding what makes sense for your team, and you understanding your opponent. Because see, a lot of the strategy that plays out is you got to figure out the chemistry on your own team, and then you got to also figure out, what is my opponent doing and how do we adjust to know which strategy to lean into? Because you do see a lot of times there are teams that use a little bit of a mixed strategy, meaning like they'll use the perimeter strategy for a while, and then when the post game opens up, they'll shift their strategy to take advantage of opportunities and openings. Now, I know maybe you don't like basketball, maybe that's too much detail, but here's how that connects to running a law firm. So when it comes down to running a law firm, here's what I've seen around the strategies. You can have a perimeter strategy. And what I will say is, from a perimeter strategy, you have a lot of cases that are, or maybe you take less cases that are very high in value, meaning that you're going to handle, let's say, maybe it's a lot of contingency cases, or you're going to handle cases that are very high in value, which means you don't have to actually win that many to actually produce a profitable law firm. And then I see some that work the low post strategy, meaning like you're getting in there and you're competing, you're going for, hey, I want the volume. I want high volume of cases, which means I probably need to actually support more cases to be able to hit the same revenue or the same profitability levels. And whatever strategy you're using doesn't mean that your firm is good or bad, your firm is better or worse than any others. It's really coming down to understanding what strategy makes sense. Now, for those firms that tend to focus on more of the heavy, I would say, perimeter, meaning they're doing very high-end cases, a lot of times that's going to require that you need to have the right level of associates or lawyers or attorneys on your team to be able to handle those cases, like people who can actually go to court and actually argue those cases out. Like, you need to make sure, do we have the right staff on the team to support the strategy that we're using? Now, if you're using a perimeter strategy, meaning you're going to be, if you're a firm that's going to focus on very high value cases, you want to start asking yourself is, okay, what does it cost us to have the right type of staff to support that strategy? How much do we have to pay our attorneys? And if we get more paralegals or legal assistants, what's the experience level that we need? And oftentimes, the more experience the senior paralegal is, or the more experience the senior legal assistant is, probably the higher cost and salary is going to be. And so you need to ask yourself, if we are going to focus on very high value cases, is do you have the right legal staff to support it? And what would that legal staff cost you? Because what you do want to do is you want to say, hey, if we're going to focus on high value cases, and I know that I need to hire a more experienced attorney, I need to hire more experienced paralegals and legal assistants, that is going to cost me more money. Now you need to compare the cost of that staff to the potential cost of the types of cases that they are going to work on. And you need to do that math to say, does it make sense for us? Do we actually have the cash flow to be able to support a strategy like that? And then also, you probably need to keep in mind, if you're going for more high value cases, that might mean that the revenue cycle is going to be a little bit longer. For example, if you're doing a lot of contingency work and they're very high value cases, that case might not close for like several months. And sometimes that case may not close for a year. And you need to understand, do you have enough cash to actually fund your business during the time that case is being worked? Because if you have to wait an entire year for that case to settle, it's, can your business survive in the meantime? Because yes, it will be great to get a $2 million from a case that closes, but if that case takes a year, how are you going to fund your business in the meantime? Now, on the other hand, if you're going with the, what I call the low post strategy, mean we're going to go with higher volume, maybe the case value isn't as high, maybe it's lower case value, but we're able to get more volume. There, what you need to think about is your processes. Do you have the processes in place to be able to deliver high volume consistently in a way that makes sense? If you need to do high volume, let's say you need to do 50 cases a month, 50 cases a month, what does your staff need to look like for you to support 50 cases a month? Is how many attorneys you need, how many paralegals, how many legal assistants? Do you have the right people in place? Because if you don't have the right people in place, then you're probably not going to be able to keep up with the volume. And if you can't keep up with the volume, that could end up impacting your reputation. That will definitely impact your cash flow and your revenue. So you need to run the numbers to say, if we're going to go for a high volume strategy, meaning if our case value is, let's say it's $25 per case, okay, how many cases do you need to actually cover your costs and to produce the type of profitability that you want in your firm? Now, a lot of this can be actually achieved when you're working with a CFO. And these are the types of questions I would ask a CFO is, hey, based on our business strategy, what do our numbers need to look like for us to be able to achieve our goals? And if the CFO is good, what they can do is go through the numbers and really calculate and help you analyze that to say, hey, based on the strategy we're using, based on the average case value, the amount of staff you have, you need X number of cases to be able to achieve your financial goals in your business. Because when you can make it that clear and you know how connected and how organized your strategy is, you can have a better chance of having a more successful law firm. And that is something we talk about a lot in these videos, different aspects of that strategy. But if you're ready to actually have a full, I guess you say, well-rounded strategy with the numbers with it, it's probably time for you to work with a CFO to help you pull that together. Now, we do CFO work, but even if you already have a CFO, maybe it's not necessarily hiring someone new, maybe it's just asking the right types of questions. And so here are some of the questions that you could ask one is, how many cases do we need to achieve our financial objectives? Also, you can ask, hey, what do you recommend is the right sales strategy from a number standpoint for us to achieve our goals? The other thing you can recommend is, what should our expenses look like if we want to be successful at achieving these financial objectives? And when you start to ask those very relevant and real tangible questions, it can really set your business up to be very successful. Hey, thanks for tuning in, and continue to check out the Law Firm Financial Wellness series that we're doing, where we're breaking down key financial concepts to help you have a more financially healthy law firm. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Law Firm and Finance Show, where we give you great content that helps you build a more successful law firm. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on all platforms and follow us for more content.